think it would be a very good thing for the world and a very good thing for the Chinese if China were in the WTO.
China went in 2001 or so. China went in and just ripped off the world.
The U.S. was part of the WTO, World Trade Organization, a group that regulates trade among member countries. In the 1990s, U.S. companies and farmers wanted to expand their markets into China's booming economy. A bipartisan supermajority in the U.S. Congress and President Bill Clinton also believed that trade with China would be advantageous to the Americans and hoped that it would promote democracy and liberal thinking in China. China officially joined the WTO in 2001, which marked a turning point in not only China's economy, but also the world economy. The acceleration of U.S. and China trade had profound consequences for both countries. While the U.S. gained cheap Chinese imported goods, it lost a significant amount of manufacturing jobs. The U.S. trade deficit with China has quintupled, and the U.S. has lost more than a quarter of manufacturing jobs since 2000. The consequences are still debated in the U.S. presidential races since 2016. Now, what is the World Trade Organization? The World Trade Organization, based out of Geneva, Switzerland, is an intergovernmental organization that regulates global trade. The World Trade Organization was originally called the General Agreements on Trade and Tariffs, GATT, founded in 1945. Countries wanted to join the WTO because of the access they would get to all of the other member countries' economies. There would be reduced tariff rates, and this would allow developing countries to expand the market for their goods and services. China also wanted to be part of the WTO for similar reasons, and raise the living standards of their population through exports. The U.S. was one of the original members of the WTO, and since the collapse of the Soviet Union in the early 1990s, became the sole superpower, with greater political power matched by economic power. So, how did this all happen? It was the winter of 2001, and the U.S. Senate had recently approved a House of Representatives bill, known as H.R. 4444, or the China Trade Deal Bill. In the 1980s, Communist China, under leader Deng Xiaoping, introduced several reforms to move towards a market economy, which included joining the WTO. The U.S. played a major role in the accession of China into the World Trade Organization, and during this time frame was considered to be doing well economically. In 2000, President Bill Clinton outlined his hopes while speaking about the China Trade Deal Bill.
Bringing China into the WTO is a win-win decision. It will protect our prosperity, and it will promote the right kind of change in China. It is good for our farmers, for our manufacturers, and for our investors. Encouraging China to play by international rules, I say again, is an important step toward a safer, saner world.
The bipartisan bill aimed to enhance the U.S. economy, help bring China into the WTO, and also protect U.S. manufacturing jobs. They believed that opening up China's economy for international trade would help promote democracy there. They hoped that China would give citizens more rights and freedom. China's economy was mostly closed to outside trade till the 1980s. However, China wanted to fix its economy through trade and development from the effects of Mao Zedong's Cultural Revolution of the 1960s and 1970s. Under President Deng Xiaoping, China began to sign trade agreements with other countries. China officially gained observer status in the GATT in 1986 and worked to join the organization. In 1995, China officially requested to join the follow-on for GATT, which is the WTO. On December 11, 2001, China acceded into the World Trade Organization.
By adding China to the WTO, we strengthen the organization by further integrating China's 1.2 billion people and $1 trillion economy into the world market network.
Import tariffs on Chinese products decreased from 32% to 8%. Hence, U.S. consumers paid lower prices on imported Chinese goods. Manufacturing companies in other countries, including in the U.S., were forced to find ways to counter cheaper Chinese imported goods. China's strategy, under its leader Deng Xiaoping, wanted to create a manufacturing economy that exported cheaper goods to all over the world. Due to increasing demand for its cheaper products, China experienced explosive trade growth. Joining the WTO was the beginning of China becoming the global superpower we now know. As for the U.S. and its citizens, it was a mixed blessing. At first, U.S. political leaders were happy with their choice as consumers benefited from the new low prices, and economists believed that the imports of cheaper Chinese goods kept U.S. consumer inflation in check. However, many workers in the U.S. manufacturing sector had a different story. With China's low cost of labor, manufacturing businesses could no longer keep up and had to close their factories in the U.S. or move to China. Millions of Americans lost their jobs. Economists coined this effect as the China shock. From this point on, tensions between China and the U.S. rose sky high, where in the near future would become worse than ever before. The idea that China's accession into the WTO would be without any costs started fraying during the depths of the global financial crisis in 2008 and 2009. Initial efforts were made to undo free global trade agreements with China when President Obama imposed tariffs on certain manufacturing goods, such as tires and steel. The benefits of China joining the WTO were immediate, but the cost of the deal was becoming more apparent as the years passed. Ever since China's accession to the WTO, trade has significantly benefited them more than the United States, causing the U.S. trade deficit to go from $68 billion in 1999 to $382 billion in 2022. China soon became the world's largest exporter. The main industry that powered China is its manufacturing. Unfortunately, Chinese working conditions do not improve. Despite new forced labor laws by the U.S., the Chinese political party and government is not taking action to enforce these laws. Citizens are forced to endure terrible treatment, and foreign manufacturers have moved their production bases to take advantage of these benefits. The now familiar Made in China label that we see in our everyday stores has not been without costs. China's rapid economic growth is also a reason why it's part of many disputes. China hasn't followed all of the WTO commitments, which is a factor why it had such exponential growth in such a short time. The H.R. 4444, or the China Trade Deal Bill, had aimed to stop China's cheap prices from damaging the U.S.'s economy, just as it reneged the WTO commitments. However, China did not follow these fair trade practices as expected. China has gone against many agreements with their discriminatory trade restrictions, plagiarization, forced technology transfer, dumping of products, industrial subsidies, and that's not naming everything.
And if we allow China to do this, particularly using unfair trade practices, we won't have a future.
Tit for tat, tariffs were imposed by President Trump and President Xi Jinping of China on highly economically sensitive manufacturing and agriculture products from either country. If nothing changes and demand for Chinese products grow, China will surpass the U.S. in the coming years. Throughout the 2024 political race, this will be a major topic of discussion and one that will determine who our next president will be, and most importantly, if the U.S. stays on top. The events of the third decade of this century can be traced back to the deal at the WTO, marking a turning point in history.